All right. So hi, French. Good having you at the office. Could you just introduce yourself briefly and tell us that which book you authored and which one we have right here?
Sure, thank you very much. I'm the author of Dying Hard, and it's the story of Company B in the 39th Infantry Regiment, 9th Infantry Division in World War II. And I wrote it because my father was a private first class in this unit during 1944 and part of 1945.
Gotcha. And I know that for this book you used a combination of sort of official sources, archival sources, and also private sources as well. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Right. The internet, with things like Ancestry.com, you can find a lot of people. So I knew the names of the soldiers in Company B, and I was able to find their relatives. For example, sons, daughters, grandsons, granddaughters, uncles, things of that nature. Get in contact with them and then get a lot of information about their soldier and his experiences in Company B that they knew. Although I have to say that, including my father, these guys didn't talk a lot about their wartime experiences after they got back to the United States.
Gotcha. And so a bit about your educational background. You graduated from West Point in 1974, I believe.
1974.
And that's a unique education. It's very different from conventional, liberal arts education. Do you think that attending West Point, graduating from West Point, do you think that strongly impacted the way you write your books and the way that you have your career as an author has developed? And if so, how?
I think it did partially because almost everything up there is military in nature. And we study a lot of military history. And back in those days, in the early 70s, a lot of what we studied was World War II. So I got an interest in that. I wouldn't say that the Army taught me how to write history. They have a certain way of military correspondence, and you don't really use a lot of adjectives and things of that nature. But clearly the subject matter was, and then I met people who had fought in other wars, and some of them were our instructors. And so it was, not only were they teachers, but they had actually done some of these things. And so I think that helped a great deal.
Makes sense to me. You've authored more than a dozen books now, even just with Schiffer.
Yeah, I think it's getting
a couple more of them back there in the back.
Right. I think we're at pretty close to 20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you've learned a lot about being an author over the course of those books were authored over a really long time. And what advice would you give to potential authors, and specifically authors who want to write military history?
Okay, I would say the first thing is you've got to know when you run across something that this could have a really impactful story behind it. It's kind of like listening to a door knock. You can either not open the door or open it and see what's on the other side. You have to be willing to open the door. And I think that's very important. I think it teaches you how to look through archives, what questions to ask, what kind of information to look for. That helped a great deal. For example, in Dying Hard, every company in the Army back in those days, of course this is before computers, had to submit what was known as a company morning report every day. How many soldiers are there, who's arrived, who's departed, why are they departing? They might have been killed or wounded or just reassigned, where the unit was specifically, and you can use an Army map and you can get within 100 yards of where that unit was from the Army Company Morning Report. So that helps, and those, for example, are all down outside of St. Louis in the National Archives, and you can go down and you can see them on microfilm. And so you can do that as well to get the documentation you need, as well as reading books on the subject. But I think also it's key, you probably want to find a new angle. I don't know how many books have been written on the Little Bighorn in 1876, but if it's less than 5,000, I would be surprised. So what are you going to write about? What interests you? What do you want to find out more that's going to set your book a little different from somebody else's, rather than just rehash the same old stuff? So you want primary sources, which are unit reports. Secondary is what another person may have written, and you're quoting that person or using their ideas.
Very cool. To me, it sounded kind of like 3 main points. It was like having that intellectual curiosity, then like understanding how military record keeping and archiving works, and where the primary source material is and how to access it. And then lastly, making sure that you're differentiating your content and writing original content.
That's correct. I believe so. And then when you go to, if your book has photographs, you want to find photographs that have not appeared before in a book. People, you don't want to use the same photograph of the Marines raising the flag on Iwo Jima. Everybody's seen that. But maybe if you found a photograph of them 5 minutes before that, that might be very interesting, and people haven't seen that before as well. Plus, in military history, I think it's important to have some maps so people can see what where the people were. And what I like about the way that we do books, the way you do books here, you put the map in very close to the text that talks about that area, so the person doesn't have to switch back to a section on maps and then lose their train of thought.
Yeah, I agree. I think specifically with books on military topics intended for, in some cases, military audience, those maps are a must. Well, French, I appreciate you taking time to chat a bit on camera about yourself as an author and your process. And Dying Hard is going to be available in a few weeks here.
It will. I think another month.
Cheers. Thanks, French.
Thank you very much.